Okay, well, it's 5:15. We have a quorum. I'll call the meeting to order. I think maybe what we can do is, because we're expecting a couple more, is maybe move down to 2.2. Jen, do you want to do the overview of the year-end budget adjustments and things? And
Should I be standing this way to you guys?
yep,
Okay, good. Okay, so tonight I am asking you to.
Could you use the mic?
Yeah, we're gonna need you at the mic. I can't.
Just make sure one's green. It is. Okay, this evening I'm asking the Port Authority to approve a budget adjustment. As you may recall, the only fund that we budget in is the Port's General Fund. And the Port's General Fund kind of takes over everything that is not done by all the rest of the funds in the TIF project admin funds. So if we're not working on a TIF admin project, then charges get put to the Port's General Fund. We are asking for a $105,000 budget, or excuse me, $115,000 budget adjustment. And this is primarily due, well, in full, due to wages, salaries, and benefits. And I've already talked to President Erickson and explained that I could go make this as short or as long as you want. So I can make this very short. If you've had an opportunity to look at the rest of the budgets, overall, the Port Authority for wages and salaries was on track with what we anticipated, but we didn't have it in the admin funds, in the mall funds, because some of those projects didn't go, we didn't get as far on working on those for the Bloomington Central Station and for the mall. Specifically, I think the water park was one of the biggest ones. So that is what has really driven this putting things into the Port's General Fund. So the time that Shane, Becky, and Jason work on that, and even for myself, went more directly into the Port's General Fund, so, which is driving why we're asking for the budget adjustment for 2021. So with that, again, I'm more than happy to entertain any questions on any of the information that I presented. Obviously, as you probably noticed, it is not balance sheet and income statements. I went basically back to what we've been presenting to you guys for, excuse me, for budgets, so that you'd have a little comparison, year to year comparison in there as well. Again, I don't know if there's anything in particular that I can point to that says, hey, well, we were anticipating, you know, like one of the things was we had projected in 2020 that in 2021 we would be spending money on the Met Center parking skyway. That didn't happen. So that obviously, if you look in the capital project funds for the mall, you know, that certainly we had a positive to what we anticipated before. You know, excuse me, Rosa Development and the American Square, those are moving forward, but not quite where we were necessarily anticipating. Their Bloomington Central Station, again, is also doing a lot of work in Bloomington Central Station. And I think in 2021, we were pretty close to what we anticipated with what we had, you know, when we did our projections in 2021. So those are still the same. So the other things that we have in there is the debt service. Obviously, debt service is debt service. Nothing's going to change in that one. We anticipated it, and that's what we spent on those. And same with the BCS Lennar projects. Those are mostly paying back for your the special assessments from McGough and the Lennar landscaping. So with that,
excuse me, I guess I neglected to take attendance, which we need because we have somebody be remote. So Carolyn, do you want to call the roll? And then we'll be official so we don't have somebody dispute our
Yes.
activities.
Bussey. Carter.
Present.
Hunt.
Present.
Keller.
Yes, present.
Thank you. And I will note that you are remote at a public place at Ruth Hardy Park, 700 Tamarisk Road in Palm Springs. Lunds,
Here.
Peterson, Erickson.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, getting back then to your presentation, I just talked briefly to you before the meeting, and because we've got one item on here that I think that could take a fair amount of time, and we've got a 6 o'clock thing. What I'd like to see, do any Port Authority commissioners have any questions on the financials? I think they're, if we take a look at it, probably if there was a year that was difficult to budget for and have, the results come in, we've been through it. I mean, the last 2 years are probably, anybody that is writing dissertations on anything that could happen for budget variances probably would have a pretty good thesis, but at any rate, so we have one action item that we need to do, so if there's no questions, and that is to approve this budget general fund adjustment. So I would entertain a motion. It's on page 16 of your package. For that,
I'll move for approval.
Commissioner Hunt makes the motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Luntz. Any further discussion? Carolyn, do you want to call the roll?
Carter,
Aye.
Hunt,
Aye.
Keller,
Aye.
Lunds,
Aye.
and Erickson.
Aye.
5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and we appreciate it. One of the things that I've always been amazed with in my over, I guess, 30 years of working with the Port Authority and stuff is really the quality of our city staff, and we appreciate so much to do it, and because you guys are so competent, we have a level of confidence that we wouldn't have if we saw a lot of things coming. So thank you very much for all your efforts.
Well, thank you very much for the vote of confidence.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think what I'm going to do is maybe move down to then 2.3, the contract for general legal counsel services with Kennedy and Graven, if we can do that. That's okay. And is that something that you're going to, Jason or Shane, or?
Mr. Mayor, can you hear, or Mr. President, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Great. Yes, I can do item 2.3, and then I think we should move to 2.4 until the mayor is here for the other voting item. 2.4 is another informational item.
Okay. Well, we also have 2.1 to go back to too, so.
Yep. We'll catch that one. I recommend doing that at the end. So item 2.3 is our legal services RFQ, and relatively simple item. I don't think it necessitates a lot of time unless the board wants to talk about it, but we did an RFP process. We got a proposal from Kennedy and Graven, who's our existing Port Authority counsel, and we're recommending that we move forward with the contract with Kennedy again, and be happy to entertain any questions on that item.
Well, Shane, I noticed we did have an increase. We went from 210 for 2022 to 250. My recollection is they have not had an increase for a period of time. Is that my recollection correct? Do you know offhand?
Mr. President, Commissioners, while it's true they have increases, what I'd say about Kennedy and Graven is their rates are much more reasonable as it compares to other law firms that we work with.
Okay, well, any other Port Authority questions on that? If not, then I would entertain a motion for adopting Kennedy and Graven. It's on page 29 of your package.
So moved.
So moved.
Motion made by Commissioner Carter. We have a second then by Commissioner Keller. Any further discussion? Carolyn, you want to call the roll?
Carter,
Aye.
Hunt,
Aye.
Keller,
Aye.
Lunds,
Aye.
and Erickson.
Aye.
Carries 5-0. Thank you.
Okay, Shane, and then what did you suggest that we go
Mr.
to?
President, Commissioners, I recommend we go on to item 2.4. It's an item that the mayor will see in his role as mayor as well. And
Okay.
so I recommend we do that item and then come back to
Great.
item 2.
Okay, well, welcome, Mr. 2.4. Why don't you introduce yourself to us? And
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President and Commissioners. I'm Sean James. I'm a long-range planner here with the city. Let me look at the same thing as you here. And so I have an item on hotel and office conversions. That,
so why don't you just give us 2 minutes to tell us about you? How long have you been with the city? And
Yeah, thank you. So I've been with the city about 4.5 years now, and I work on like special area plans, like the 98th Street plan and a few others updates on, and then also with zoning ordinance amendments and comprehensive plan updates.
great.
What division of the city are you with? Planning, engineering, planning?
Planning.
Well, that's great. Well, again, we're fortunate, I think, in the planning area. We've got a very good staff that's done a good job taking and looking at these things before they come to us. So please go forward.
All right, thank you. So the big question, kind of keep in the back of your mind tonight, is as we're looking to be more proactive on this, is should the city encourage, remain neutral, or discourage conversions from hotels or offices to a residential type of use? That's kind of easy to maybe hone in on, oh yeah, we want to encourage, but I'll talk a little bit more here on, what each of these mean more in detail. Just real quick, some benefits and concerns related. So, as a city, we definitely want to make sure our buildings aren't sitting empty. We want efficient use of buildings, and there's certainly demand for residential use. So, this is an opportunity to increase housing supply. With hotels and sometimes with offices too, they're usually smaller rooms, and so converting those, it might make it a little easier to build in affordability as part of those projects. And then, sometimes too, if the building is, the structure is in good condition, we'd rather see it reused instead of redeveloped to a whole other, building on the site. And so, there's a sustainability aspect too. As far as concerns, certainly concerned about reduced revenue. Hotels do contribute a significant amount to the general fund. Looking at examples, it's tough to say, to put exact numbers on what some of it means, but, hotels, I think we have over 40, close to 50 of them in the city, and certainly contribute a lot to the general fund. Another concern is just the quality of housing supply. So, with any conversion, there will need to be building upgrades to meet the building code. But, you can imagine with older hotels, maybe the utility or other systems are a little bit outdated. So there's concern that, some of those might remain with a residential use then. And then also just concerned with, the way a site could be converted, how feasible it is to, say, work in some of those extra amenities we often see with residential redevelopments. So, there's a little more barriers. So we're probably familiar with slides like this, but I do want to provide background. With hotels, we saw that drastic dip in occupancy during the pandemic, and so that's partly why this topic has come about. So that blue line there, the dark blue, you can see that the pretty sharp drop in occupancy in hotels. And so at that time, we did start to receive inquiries about conversions, and you'll note the Crown Plaza did get approval to convert, and that process is underway, the partial conversion there. The tourism industry now is starting to return, and so we're excited about that. Business travel and how that returns kind of remains to be seen. And similar with offices too now, I think a lot of people are starting to work back in the office again, as traffic certainly feels that way. But there is still some work from home, and it kind of remains to be seen what the impact on office occupancy is long term. But the forecasts I've seen have shown hotel occupancy anyway is potentially returning by end of year or early next year to the pre-pandemic levels. And so, just real quick, you know, hotel rooms certainly already configured for living. Utilities are in place already. A little bit smaller rooms, but there are ways to you know, achieve flexibility for that. So, you know, this study I've really focused on hotels now, and I will focus on that the rest of the conversation. But it's easy to imagine too how the direction received for hotels could also apply to offices.
Sean, what's an approximate square footage in the average hotel room, or do they vary so much?
Yeah, they vary a little bit. I had that number and I don't recall. So it really varies on the type of service of the hotel. If it's full service or limited service, you know, is there a kitchen in the suite or not?
So like the Motel 6 would be quite a bit smaller probably.
Quite a bit
and then you
smaller.
have
So our minimum room size for residential use or like a unit is 400 square feet.
Yeah.
And I want to say the average is below that. I could be slightly off though. But so that can be a barrier sometimes with conversions. So, you know, there's a whole bunch of considerations developers and, you know, the city considers for conversions. You know, there's the market, you know, how much demand there is for the residential use. You know, there's whether or not the structure is easy to convert, and then if the site is, you know, suitable for residential or not. But, you know, from the city's perspective, and you know, planning, what I'm more familiar with is zoning is really what we have more control over, with when it comes to whether we want to encourage or discourage conversions. So talk more about zoning standards here. Quick, this is where the previous map showed all the hotels in the city. And so this map here is showing where the underlying zoning district already allows residential, or at least a mixed use residential. And so, you know, that's almost all the hotels here in the city that already allow residential. So that's not a barrier. It's really these multifamily residential standards that are barriers to conversions. And so I've listed 5 here, pretty common ones, you know, enclosed parking, number of parking spaces. We require storage for each unit. And I mentioned the unit size already has to be so large. And then hotels can be a little bit more impervious on their site, whereas residential uses have to incorporate a little more green space. So sometimes that can be a barrier too. And I do want to get into the weeds a little bit here because, you know, I've talked about all of these barriers, but our code, the way it is today with the Opportunity Housing Ordinance and with our plan development flexibility, there is quite a bit of flexibility already built into the code. And so if you really focus on just that maximum column there, that's showing the percent deviation that would be allowed with the OHO if a project proposes like maximum affordability. And so that's often, you know, so many units at 30% AMI, most typically. So, you know, if you look at just enclosed parking, if a project proposes the max affordability, you know, so many units at that 30% AMI, then they, you know, can receive full deviation from that requirement and parking structure wouldn't be required. So while enclosed parking is a significant barrier, you know, if the project proposes enough affordability, then it's not really with our existing standards. So I focus on this because, you know, part of the question for you tonight is whether we need any code amendments to encourage conversions. And, you know, the kind of thought process is that, well, we could create another lane in the OHO and for conversions, maybe specific to them, but kind of keeping in mind too, though, that that could kind of detract from potential affordability gained through the OHO. And so we do have a handful of hotels shown here that where the zoning does not allow residential, and so these sites would need to be rezoned before we even considered those multifamily standards. And there are, I think, 13 or so. However, 6 or so are in this airport runway district, which is an overlay. It's where planes fly over, and so residential isn't allowed there regardless. So we're really only considering those other locations along 494 and 35 outside of that district. And so, the kind of thought process here is these sites need to be rezoned if we were to allow conversions. But do we want to do that? Are there certain criteria that we should be considering? If we're approached with a request, are there certain site characteristics that we want to see, or certain project characteristics? Maybe some areas of the city are more suitable than others for residential. And so staff started these couple columns, of maybe nice to have criteria or must have. And we're certainly looking for more feedback on this too. It's just to get a start on it. And so, going back to whether we discourage, remain neutral, or encourage, discourage would maybe be a little different than what we're doing now, not consider any code amendments, but also kind of stop using or discourage the use of that plan development flexibility. Whereas now we're a little bit more in the neutral zone. We don't have any code amendments targeted for this, but we've used PD flexibility through the Crown Plaza project. Encourage, maybe there are code amendments, that maybe that alternate lane in the OHO. I do want to mention too, so we do have single resident, I'm blanking on the SRO. We have SRO standards proposed on the work plan, and it's single residence occupancy, something along those lines. And so it just means that tenants have their own living space, bedroom area, and then there's shared common areas, so maybe a shared kitchen or bathroom. And so it is on the planning work plan to study that a little bit more and maybe consider standards later in the year. And so that could be, maybe more along the lines of the encourage, but it is something we're already looking into. And so this has gone before Planning Commission, HRA Board, and we'll go to council in a couple weeks here. And again, we're looking for that initial feedback on, kind of if we're approached by developers, what stance do we want to take? And, Planning Commission, HRA Board, kind of in summary said, we certainly want to encourage conversions, but maybe not to the extent that it discourages, potential affordability that could be gained. I think maybe one more slide. And so I've just summarized a few questions here that I've kind of asked throughout the presentation, and mostly just to help discussion. And, with that, I'm happy to answer questions and open it up.
Well, we appreciate your presentation, and I think this is something that's important to obviously study and be proactive on rather than, just being reactive and waiting. And it might be interesting to hear a little bit more about that Crown Plaza conversion that you've done, in that I'm not familiar with it. I know the property out there, and my recollection is that one has a fair amount of amenities within it. It was Holiday Inn or some other variant of that, but I'm sure there's pools and other things like that too. But it's interesting, and other things I've been involved with. I've been on the board of Tubman, which is a domestic violence shelter, for many, many years, and we actually acquired the old St. Paul Monastery property and converted it into a unit for housing, and it wouldn't work for very many things because you had a lot of smaller rooms, but it really made a very good conversion. So I think it's important to study these things, and you know, we clearly need to be providing more options as people go through the life cycle, and they have different needs and different things and stuff. So again, it's a very good thing. But maybe you can just give us a little more background on that Crown Plaza.
Yeah, thank you. And so Crown Plaza, I think it was a 400 some unit hotel, and it's being converted to around 200 or just over residential units built in. And so, you know, the hotel will be reduced by, you know, that many rooms, a little bit more, because I think what they had to do is combine, or, you know, in some cases it meant taking 3 hotel rooms down to, you know, 2 residential. I don't remember the exact conversion there, but it wasn't 1-to-1. That project was a little unique too, or they had could make it work because they had that parking structure next door. And so, you know, that big barrier with needing to provide enclosed parking was already taken care of with that. You know, as far as amenities go and how that works out, kind of sharing those with the hotel, I guess I can't speak to that as much. I'm not as familiar. But they did receive deviation. They did provide so many units that were affordable and received some deviation for the outside of the unit storage area, and then the minimum unit size. So for some of the units, they received that deviation, but they didn't need deviation for the other standards I mentioned.
So how much of that remained hotel then? And then the other question, wasn't the it's been years since I've been in there, but I recall the parking in there served not just the hotel, but also an office building right near there too. That's still the case?
Right, yeah, that's still the case. There's an agreement there. I don't remember who all is involved, but yeah, there's multiple parties using that parking structure. And then the hotel units, I kind of forget. If I'm remembering right, I think the residential is the upper floors. Jason shaking his head, and then hotel is the lower floors.
Well, I mean, you look at it, and I mean, if you take 2 rooms, and so you'd have 2 bathrooms, and I mean, you could, and if you do that with 3, you could have 1 2-bathroom unit and another, and so you can see how it could work. Just depends upon where your bearing walls and stuff are, and how much flexibility they have. We have some friends that bought one of those sky flat units over on 169. It used to be an office building, and they really were lovely units. Now I don't know how much work had to be done, but it's something that can make a lot of sense. So, well, as I read your recommendation from the staff, it's something that you essentially say remain neutral on it unless you're getting some input. I mean, as a port authority, we don't really get directly involved with this. We would if something comes up in South Loop, for example, or something where somebody's asking us to step in and help. So it's really much more of a planning commission, city council kind of thing, but we certainly appreciate the update.
Just in thinking of some properties that I'm aware of across the country, and you know, some that were converted, a converted medical facility that then became market rate housing. It's near a university campus, private university, and thinking of even University of Chicago, when I toured there years ago with my daughter, they had hotels, not on campus, but some were actually still hotels that became dorms, and then they were converting some others. But those, again, were tied to academic. And then I'm thinking of another in Denver that was done for, again, a hotel near one of the colleges for multi-family student housing. So the comment, are they market rate housing? Are they experienced? Because there's a certain type of developer. It's a complicated project. It's not an easy conversion. So the expertise in the developers, and then are they market? Are they all affordable? And when I hear the shared facility, is that assisted living? Is that for, maybe people challenged? Is it shelter kinds of things? So those are just a lot of things that are running through what.
Well, you know, when you talk about it and you think about how things have changed, because there's that project in Edina right by Southdale that was built. I mean, it's a high end,
Yeah.
but it was intentionally built so that people could have access to the restaurants and services from the hotel. Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
Western,
yeah. I mean, so again, we're seeing a lot of changes and modifications and things and stuff. So, well, okay. I'm just looking at my watch in terms of the time, but any other questions, Rob?
Yeah, in the staff report, Sean, I didn't see it. If I missed it, I'm sorry. Any mention of proximity to the light rail line? It would seem to me that'd be very sound justification for really changing the parking ratio requirements. I've got to believe that many of the people that might live in this type of converted housing may not have a vehicle. So I don't know, when it comes to that part of the code that needs to be changed, and you're looking for a justification for it, it seems to me that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good comment.
The bulk of these are in the South Loop area, the airport noise corridor. So, I mean, if they're way down on the strip, that's something else. But when they've got that type of access to mass transit, it seems to me that
Right.
makes sense.
Helpful. And that's something staff identified too, you know, is that a must-have criteria then if a project needs rezoning, doesn't need to have access not only to just transit, but good transit, you know, like light rail or higher frequency bus service.
Any other questions? Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll look forward to hearing from you again. And I mean, it's great to be in the loop on these things and kind of know what's happening. And it's something that I think is interesting. So we should note for the record that Commissioner Bussey has arrived.
My apologies. This one literally slipped between the couch cushions in my mind, and sorry about that.
I think the other thing we have is
Do you have couch cushions? Mr. Mayor, do you have couch cushions in your mind? I didn't follow it.
Yeah, yes, that's exactly what. Yes.
I think the other thing that's kind of fun tonight is we have 2 young visitors, which is delightful to see. I don't know if the parents want to. One I understand is Jason's son, and then Commissioner Carter also has her daughter.
Can we give them a vote?
I don't know.
Introduce them early.
Well, that's great. It's wonderful to see them come. So, if we want to, then I guess go back to item 2.1. Shane, are you going to cover that, or?
Yes, Mr. President and Commissioners. So item 2.1 is a follow-up on the water park project. One of the agreements that the Council and Port Authority did not consider as part of the ancillary agreement package was this cost review agreement with a consultant to review the costs of the public improvements to make sure that they are in line with industry standards. And SRF had started that work back in 2019. We've updated that contract to reflect the current conditions with the amounts and how the contract is structured. And staff's negotiated, rates and so on with SRF. And we're recommending that the Port Authority Board approve this consultant contract. And again, what this is for SRF to work with Ryan, work with 555. This is our independent review to make sure that the public improvements are at an appropriate cost.
So, Port Authority questions on this item? It's something, I mean, this is our standard operating procedure that I think we've always done, so. Well, if there's no questions on it, I would entertain a motion. It's on page 2 that we approve this contract. Did you have your hand up,
Oh,
Commissioner?
no. Oh, I was going to comment, I think my position is well known on the water park itself. But I understand this is an integral thing that benefits the city too. So while I'm not in support of the water park, a little bit counterproductive, but I understand it's something that has to be voted on, so.
Good.
I would like to tag on to that. My position is similar to Cynthia's. I'm probably going to continue, well, I'm not probably, I'm going to reflect the majority of the opinion and feedback I've got from citizens, friends, people, golfing buddies in Bloomington, and probably continue to reflect for a while my opposition.
All right, well, I would entertain a motion on this.
You have it from Tim.
Commissioner Keller makes the motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Carter. See, as we get old, we get these.
Sketchy, Bob, I warn you.
Okay, we've had a motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? If not, Carolyn, you want to call the roll?
Sure. Hussey,
Aye.
Carter,
Aye.
Hunt,
Aye.
Keller,
Aye.
Lunds,
No.
and Erickson.
Yes.
5-1. Thank you.
Okay. Shane, do we have anything else that we need to do before the joint session?
No, Mr. President and Commissioners, that's it before the joint session. Or the concurrent session,
Okay.
I should say.
I don't, what's the procedure? Do we adjourn and then come back in, or we just pause the meeting, or,
We have to adjourn.
I'm sorry?
I believe we adjourn. Right?
Okay, all right. Well, then I would adjourn the meeting, and we will come back together at 6 o'clock.